Hello, my name is Michaela Bauer, and I'm doing my case study over when a student's rights are wronged. Okay, so let's just summarize. Um, so in this case, we meet the Hernandez family and their sophomore son, Miguel. In the story, we learn that the family has moved to the new school, and their son, Miguel, is an all-star athlete who participates in football. On the night of a big game, Miguel suffers a serious injury that left him paralyzed from the waist down. This required Miguel to have months of rehabilitation, taking him out of school. When the doctors agreed that it was safe for him to return to school and the meeting was held, the counselor, Mrs. Gussman, created a plan for how to best introduce Miguel back into the general school day. This meeting discussed Miguel's schedule, his wheelchair needs, and the general classroom accessibility. Upon arrival, the family learned that Miguel's first day back from school, he had been transferred out of his biology class that was a requirement for him to attend college to a classroom that was wheelchair accessible. Mr. and Mrs. Hernandez scheduled a meeting to ask Miguel why he was denied access to the biology class, which was a college requirement. The family demonstrated that Miguel had been restrained from his biology class, and before the meeting began, the Hernandez family brought their attorney with them to discuss the reasonings as to why the school was denying this. This is part of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, Section 504. So legal and ethical issues. The student in question, Miguel, has suffered a serious injury from a football game since the occurrence of the accident. It has completely altered his daily life, which is causing the most friction in Miguel's schedule. Returning back to school, the counselor has changed his schedule and put him in classes that are wheelchair accessible. The altering of the classes makes it so that Miguel is not prepared to graduate from high school and be qualified to continue to the college that would need biology as a necessary general requirement. The movement of the class has not caused any physical harm, but emotional harm, belittlement. By not putting Miguel in this class, he is required. His required FAPE, which is free appropriate public education, has been taken away. While Miguel is adjusting to his new lifestyle and being in a wheelchair, that does not make him mentally incapable of completing his classes, but ultimately breaking the law of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. I believe there was a small amount of discrimination by choosing not to let Miguel take the classes needed because of the classroom and not being wheelchair accessible. This result is breaking the plan the family had set up prior to Miguel returning back to school successfully. So, synthesize. While Miguel is adjusting to his new life of being wheelchair bound, the school is failing to meet the required needs necessary to fulfill FAPE for Miguel. So, Section 4, synthesize. So we're going to talk about some general facts, the people involved, the place, and the program. So general facts. A student, Miguel, has suffered a serious injury, and as a principal in a school, we need to determine what the next steps are. People. We first want to introduce Miguel and his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Hernandez. The family has chosen to move schools where Miguel suffers a life-altering accident. We meet the school counselor, Miss Gussman, who is partially in charge of Miguel's introduction back into the school. The school fails to provide the needs necessary for Miguel's new condition. Then, as the principal, we meet the family's attorney, who is ready to discuss the issues of FAPE. So place, the community of Dover, which is in Nottingham High. This school serves 32,000 students. The school was built in the 1950s, although major reconstruction had been completed to keep up, but still 1/4 of the original school is not up to code due to lack of funds. So the program, Miguel is re-entering the school as a student with a wheelchair accessibility needs. The school is responsible for continuing to provide FAPE, which is free appropriate public education, while he continues his education. Miguel is currently not receiving the needs necessary for him to graduate and enter into a college that he wants to attend. He can not enroll in biology class because the classroom's location in the high school is not wheelchair accessible. So let's review and prioritize information. So there's damaging information, belief for outcome, stakeholders, what to learn, and how to make an informed decision. So the damaging information. If the school is to not provide the correct classes for Miguel, they would be in violation of FAPE. They would also be in violation of wheelchair accessibility to him, as well as ultimately discriminating against those who are disabled. Belief and outcome. Those involved are Miguel, who has suffered a serious injury, his parents, who are trying to advocate for their son in his new way of life, the principal, and then the counselor, Miss Gussman, all believe that at the end of the day, they are doing what is best for Miguel, but that is being interpreted differently depending on the person, ultimately not providing FAPE. Stakeholders. According to what the case study tells us, there are 6 stakeholders involved, so Miguel and then his parents, the counselor, principal, and the attorney. They are all creating a plan to help Miguel re-enter to school. There is a misunderstanding on what should be done and how to do it correctly. What to learn. What to know is that while the counselor and the Hernandezes are creating a plan for Miguel, the plan was altered when they discovered the biology classroom was not wheelchair accessible for Miguel, ultimately not making the school completely accessible. So informed decisions. As of right now, I do believe there's enough valid information for the principal to come up with a plan of attack to take care of the wheelchair accessibility problems. So, Section 6, identifying consequences. So we're going to discuss what I've come up with 5 different options to potentially solve this. So 1 would be no change. 2 would start making the old classrooms ADA accessible. 3 would move the class for now. 4 would be Zoom into the classroom. And then 5 would try to make this a co-curricular project to make the classroom wheelchair accessible. So, option 1, no change. For this option, the school would keep Miguel in the alternate science class, which was wheelchair accessible for part of the school. Option 2, start making the old classrooms ADA accessible. This would for sure be the most drastic option, and it would cost the school thousands upon thousands of dollars in renovating to bring the old part of the school up to code. In the end, making the school compliant with the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. One thing I forgot to include was that this, even though this would be done, it would take a long amount of time and probably be past when Miguel is needing the classroom. The third option, move the class. I believe this would be the simplest and most cost-effective plan. That would be to solve the immediate problem. If the biology class was moved to a different classroom for the hour Miguel is in, it would still keep everything in compliance, and he would be able to take the required class for college and would be able to, and FAPE would still be applied here. Option 4, I came up with this option because I believe how prevalent technology is in our daily lives. I believe that we should explore the option of technology. This again would be, the most cost-effective option. The teacher would not have to leave their classroom, and Miguel would be able to access the classroom via the internet in a wheelchair-accessible part of the school. While this is not the most inclusive option, it still does let him take the class. Option 5, try to make this a co-curricular project to make the classroom wheelchair accessible. This option would require lots of effort on multiple people's part. We would have the wood shop or welding shop classes work together to create a ramp into the classroom. This would potentially make the classroom wheelchair accessible. Ultimately, this would be a quick fix and something that would probably not last long term, but could make it so that Miguel could go to the biology room. So let's evaluate the options. So the pros and cons. So option 1, the pros would be the student would get their science credit fulfilled. Cons, this breaks FAPE and the Rehabilitation Act. Option 2, the pros would be the school would be up to code. Cons would be the renovations would not be done in time for the student and it would be extremely costly. Option 3, the pros would be this is the quickest solution, no cost, minimal amount of change. And the cons, the teacher and other students would have to move classrooms. Option 4, the pros would be that the student would still be able to access their class. Cons would be that it's in an alternative location and would not be with the teacher or the students. Option 5, the pros would be the students would be helping to create a solution for Miguel. Cons would be that it would probably be costly and it's not a long-term solution. So, choose the best option. So I really believe that option number 3, to move the class, is the best option. This option would be the best because it would require the least amount of money and it would be the fastest option to keep Miguel in the required class for college. The classroom would also be wheelchair accessible. So, path. I would like to begin by holding a meeting with the family, the counselor, and apologizing that Miguel was moved out of his original class. Meet with the teacher and the counselor and find a new classroom for the biology class to meet. Hold a review meeting with the staff to make sure everyone understands what FAPE is. So, what happens? I believe that that most teachers would be willing to help accommodate for the student in his wheelchair accessibility. I do feel that depending on the teacher, they might be slightly aggravated to have to leave their classroom, but working with that to help the teachers, to educate them what FAPE is and to understand that we need to do this to provide the correct schooling for this student. Needs to know. I believe the biology teacher needs to know of the situation, the parents, the counselor, and lastly, the staff as a whole might want to know whoever is teaching Miguel. Okay. Involvement. I believe that the principal should be the one to handle the situation. The principal should make sure they have a good, clean, and clear communication with the family and the teacher. Warn, don't threat. So after the situation has been solved, I think the next steps would be to bring in the counselor one-on-one and talk about why they moved the student and was that a good idea. Then discuss the idea of having a whole staff in service on FAPE and how to provide that correctly. Now, plan B, this is if our original option does not work out. If the plan is to fall through, I think we need to look back at one of the other options, so 4 or 5, and discuss which one would be the next best plan of attack. So, final thoughts as we end this. So, to be in line with the NELP3 standard, I believe that as a human being, we're going to make mistakes, but it's how we deal with those mistakes that we have made and how to right the wrongs we have done. Given the current situation, the counselor did not think through all of the possible scenarios before making a decision. Moving Miguel solved the issue of the wheelchair and only looked at him as a disability, not a person with a disability, realizing that there is more to the person than their disability. The principal is ultimately responsible for making sure that all students get the correct form of education they are required to graduate in their future career in college. In the end, the principal should correct the wrong that has been done, enrolling Miguel back in the biology class that is required, then speak with the counselor about what to do to make sure this doesn't happen again in the future. So the 3.2 standard, I believe as a future administrator, you're responsible for making those tough calls and knowing when to make those tough calls. In this situation, the principal needs to demonstrate the capacity to advocate for those students who are required the equitability of access to educational resources, technologies, and opportunity for them to be successful in their well-being. In this situation, the student, it is an imperative that the principal can advocate for all students, but especially the students with disabilities, as these typically are students who are our most fragile and vulnerable. And that's all. Thank you so much.